The Fallout, Scene 7, Episode 1. By dawn, the story was everywhere, on every continent, with millions of people listening, watching and talking about Operation Black Sand. Hashtag the Zamfara Black Gold. Millions of screens flickered from Lagos to London, from Beijing to Washington, and from Johannesburg to Dubai. News anchors spoke in urgent tones over grainy satellite footage of fire and smoke rising from the Zamfara desert. And on TV stations, it was breaking news: U.S. military strike inside Nigerian territory. 2 Chinese nationals believed to be among the dead. Meanwhile, on social media, hashtags flooded the internet: hashtag Zamfara drone strike, hashtag Zamfara Black Sand, hashtag Zamfara war by proxy. And within hours, social media was in total meltdown. Millions of retweets, angry threads, memes, and unsubstantiated conspiracy charts as usual, orchestrated by conspiracy pundits. Everyone on the planet had an opinion. But no one had the full story. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., inside the White House press briefing room, the air was electric, thick with heat and tension. Rows of reporters filled every seat and aisle, microphones jutting out like a forest of silver reeds. The lights above the podium were blindingly white, reflecting off camera lenses and beads of sweat on nervous foreheads. While they waited for Operation Black Sand briefing. Then the White House press secretary walked in, flanked by the White House chief of staff. Then they stood by the podium, while she adjusted her notes. "Morning, everyone," she said, looking at the audience of reporters, press men and women swamped by cameras and audio recording devices. Her voice trembled slightly when she began. "I can confirm that this morning, the United States Department of Defense successfully carried out a counterterrorism strike under Operation Black Sand, targeting a network responsible for the illicit mining and trafficking of strategic minerals funding terrorism in Africa's Sahel region." She paused. And the room exploded in noise. "Madam Press Secretary, word from Beijing says Qiang Wei and Yichen Lu were charity aid workers." "Are they part of the collateral damage?" shouted a reporter from CNN, repositioning his microphone to capture her response. "Madam Press, was this an intelligence failure? Did the Pentagon target the wrong people?" another pressed. The chief of staff leaned forward, face stony but cautious with his choice of words. Operation Black Sand was authorized under international counterterrorism protocols. All intelligence was verified through multiple channels, before the strike. A third reporter yelled over the others, "But sir, is the White House aware that China has accused the U.S. of deliberate aggression? Are we on the brink of a diplomatic crisis? Is America ready for retaliatory measures from China?" Another reporter shouted across the aisle. The room was a beehive of press activities and chaos. Cameras clicked like gunfire. Phones buzzed constantly as aides passed handwritten notes between podium and press row. And the tension was so thick it seemed to hum through the air conditioning vents in White House. Now, inside the Pentagon, Situation Room. Down the river, the Pentagon was running at full tilt. Phones rang non-stop, secured lines, red lines, and backchannels all enveloped in communication chaos and crisis of urgency. Voices clashed in overlapping calls. A voice said, "States on the line with Beijing." And another, a female voice. "London wants clarification," she said. "EU asking for confirmation of civilian casualties," she continued. It was a busy morning. Screens glowed with real-time analytics of online sentiment, stock fluctuations, and troop readiness. Every department was spinning at high velocity: Defense Department, State Department, Intelligence, Cyber Ops. Everyone was trying to control the narratives of Operation Black Sand, that had already been spun out of control by China's online propaganda machines, which has escaped the grasp of the White House. In a corner office, General McKenna, head of Joint Operations, stared out the window toward the Potomac, jaw locked. "The story's already gone global," he muttered. "And the truth's whatever hits first on social," he said, shaking his head. "The sad reality of our generation," he muttered as he walked away from the window. Meanwhile in Beijing, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was preparing to address the press. And across the world, the mood was icy and different. The Chinese flag hung still behind the podium as the Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, dressed in navy, read from a prepared statement. Cameras flashed like lightning. As the world stood still. Waiting, watching, and listening. She said, "The government of the People's Republic of China condemns the unlawful and politically motivated strike by the United States, which resulted in the deaths of 2 Chinese nationals engaged in humanitarian work in Africa. We view this as an act of hostility and interference under the guise of counterterrorism." Reporters shouted questions in Mandarin, English, and French. Will China retaliate? She looked directly into the camera, her voice calm but cutting. China reserves the right to respond proportionately. The right to defend itself and its citizens from external aggression, wherever they are in the world. Meanwhile, a large crowd had gathered outside, in Beijing's embassy district. Anti-US demonstrations swelled. Flags burned. Banners read, "Operation Black Sand, White Lies." On social media across Weibo and TikTok, the narrative was weaponized. Clips of the explosion, images of charred trucks, all stitched with nationalistic music. The line was clear: the West kills, China rebuilds. In Washington, D.C., the back channels were busy working behind the scene. Diplomacy was on full throttle, perhaps heading into overdrive. Phones rang through the night, encrypted, and untraceable. Ambassadors called ambassadors. State Department envoys whispered through closed doors. Aaron Slater, the U.S. ambassador to China, received the call at dawn. "Beijing has summoned you," said a voice from the National Security Council. "They want answers, and they're not asking nicely. Be prepared. And keep us updated as soon as you are out of the meeting with them. Good luck." He added. Within hours, Slater was sitting across from a table of Chinese officials in Beijing's marble-silent foreign ministry, cameras banned, translators whispering. The tone was sharp, accusatory, formal, and it was a ritualized duel in diplomatic language. A language spoken in diplomatic world especially during diplomatic fallouts. The streets, in Washington, D.C. was no different. By noon, protests had erupted outside the White House gates. Crowds chanted under gray skies, a mix of anti-war groups, peace activists, and environmentalists. No more proxy wars. They sang. And drummed. Hands off Africa. Hands of Africa. Africa for Africans. The smell of rain mixed with the bitter tang of tear gas from the barricades. Drums pounded. Police radios crackled. Reporters wove between flags and megaphones, live-streaming every moment of the chaos, the aftermath of Operation Black Sand. Then followed by global reactions. Europe tried to calm the storm. From London to Paris, leaders called for restraint. NATO issued a statement urging de-escalation through dialogue. In Berlin, the Chancellor spoke cautiously, "We understand America's right to self-defense, but global stability requires accountability." China, meanwhile, played the long game. Their state media flooded the airwaves with documentaries on Africa's exploitation by Western powers. A new hashtag trended on Chinese social media, #containment in disguise. #Operation Black Sand is a lie. Then came the move that sent shockwaves through the markets. Beijing announced economic sanctions against select U.S. defense contractors and foreign mining corporations linked to the Black Sand operation. The message was clear: retaliation won't come from missiles, it'll come from money. Inside the White House, later that night, the West Wing lights were still on. President Nelson Palmer stood by the window, watching the press lights flash beyond the lawn. His chief of staff entered quietly. "Sir, China's calling this the Zamfara incident. They've frozen trade negotiations. And the UN is demanding a briefing." Palmer's reflection in the glass looked tired, and older. "We did what we had to do," he said. "But now the world wants a villain. He turned back to the Situation Room screen, footage of the trucks, the smoke, and the explosion. For a moment, he said nothing. Then softly, almost to himself, sometimes saving the world means setting it on fire first. That is exactly what this is about. And that's what Operation Black Sand has achieved. The room was silent. Only the faint hum of monitors filled the air, and the echo of a world teetering on the edge of something far bigger than a single strike. Please like, share and subscribe. Watch out for Episode 1 Scene 8.